I planted this tree. It's taller than me now. It was about that high when I planted it.
And I'd like to say thank you to Diana Athill, my first editor in England.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Diana Athill.
Like the beat, beat, beat of the tom-tom when the jungle shadows fall. Like the tick, tick, tock of the stately clock as it stands against the wall.
It's all looking a bit shaggy this time of day. Whatever one puts in that corner just turns up its toes and dies.
Night and day, you are the one.
No one writes more frankly about sex, love and death than Diana Athill. Born during the First World War, she spent much of her childhood in her grandmother's house here in Norfolk. She still visits her cousin in a cottage across the field.
Night and day.
Many of her favourite children's books are still here.
My first loves, when I was very young indeed, I would rescue them. That was how my first sort of erotic daydreams began. I would rescue this poor person, and he would come round from a swoon, finding me leaning over him with my cloud of dark hair like a curtain. I was the most mouse-coloured child you can possibly imagine, with straight hair, and I was going to end up with coal black hair down to my knees. And I remember an awful day when I was 11 or so, looking at myself in the looking glass in the bathroom and thinking, no, I am going to change. Of course I'm going to change. Of course I'm going to change quite a lot. But I'm never going to change as much as that.
For most of her career, Diana Athill was a publisher and editor. Not just any editor, an exceptional one. She once wrote, "An editor must never expect thanks. We must always remember that we are only midwives. If we want praise for progeny, we must give birth to our own." And that's just what she did.
In her 80s, she emerged as an author. "Here I am, almost at my end," she writes, "and my beginning rises up to meet me. Or rather, even when I was far away from it, it was always there. And now I have come back to it."
Hello. I come with my entourage.
Yes. Come on in.
Now 92, Diana has moved into an old people's home in North London.
Yes, come in, come in. Isn't it sad that there are no men? There used to be, apparently.
A few.
A few, and they're all remembered very fondly by the people who remember.
They would be, wouldn't they?
The last man in my life was Sam, who was born in the Caribbean. I gave Sam sex that suited him. The first, but not most enduring, attraction was that I was white and well-bred. For 7 years, I spent a night with him about once a week. We rarely did anything together except make ourselves a pleasant little supper and go to bed. We had little in common, apart from liking sex. We also shared painful feet, which was almost as important as liking sex, because when you start feeling your age, it is comforting to be with someone in the same condition. Our relationship ended gently. He said, "What about coming to bed?" But I could see he was relieved when I said no. The next thing I heard about him was that he had died suddenly of a heart attack.
Anne said the men do come and say, you know, it's our room available, but they give a look round.
It's too daunting.
Well, no. They say this daunting mass of old women, yes. And they think to themselves, oh my God, I would be lost in that. Yeah. And they don't...
They have the time of their lives.
What made you decide to come and live here, then, in the Mary Fielding home?
It occurred to me that if I was going to be ill ever, I would have to depend on dear friends and my nephews. I've got no children to come and stand around. And this just wasn't on. And by a great piece of luck, a friend of mine had to go to an old person's home. And I thought, how ghastly, how awful. I had this terrible image of what an old person's home would be like. I must go and see her. And I remember opening the door, and Rose struggled up from her chair and said, "Darling, you've got to come and live here. It's the most wonderful place."
And they're quite demanding about who they take, aren't they, here, actually?
There's a wonderful sort of theory locally that they don't accept you unless you read Proust and Kafka, which is an overstatement. But they do sort of grill you fairly much. What they like is to get people who've had interesting lives.
There comes a time when it dawns on you that your legs have become so useless that if you try to depend on them for more than a few steps without some sort of prop, such as sticks or, God help you, a Zimmer, you would simply fall down. At that point, your car represents life. You hobble towards it, you ease your unwieldy body laboriously into the driver's seat, and lo, you're back to normal.
It looks terrible, because I've bumped into so many things. It looks very ancient, but it never, never fails to start.
Scars, you call them.
Scars. It's a scarred car.
Off you whiz, just like everyone else. Restored to freedom, restored almost to youth. I've always liked my car. Now I love it.
You have to get a little bit further in. Evening. Leave my stick in the car.
Her neck is slightly more stretched.
I'm doing life drawing, which I love. It really is a very consuming thing to do.
The sternum is at this angle.
It's tremendous hard work. I don't know why. You come away from it exhausted.
Exactly.
And what is it about drawing?
It's looking and looking and looking at the human figure, and then the actual putting down of a line that looks good.
I was drawing horses, as I constantly did, when my aunt leant over my shoulder and said, "Draw a naked man." I hesitated. She, seeing what I was thinking, said, "Go on. You needn't put in his little arrangements if you don't want to." So I drew a shapeless forked radish, and she looked disappointed. I knew I had failed in some way, that there was something of significance I should have been able to do with a human body instead of being embarrassed by it.
It's just a landscape that I like.
So my aunt and my own temperament equipped me with eyes, and seeing things remained through the dreariest stretches of my life a reason for living.
My part of the family hardly ever...
Diana has had to shed possessions to squeeze into her small room at the home, keeping only her very favourite books and pictures.
My two pinups are Cézanne and Goya.
Now, he was a very unconventional man.
He was a strange man. He was such a, apparently, by all accounts, just an ordinary chap. When you knew him, no one knows much about him. When he was an old, old man, he said to somebody, "I'm still learning. I'm still learning." Wonderful. I'm really just living in my own head, largely. Just sort of letting ideas drift through my head.
By sitting here in your room, you can experience the world.
I think that so much of my experience that is important to me has not been lived really by me at all, but has been read. It's voices. Byron's letters, for instance. You are actually hearing a voice still over all those years, speaking, saying what it said, thinking what it thought. It's magic.
Everything important in my life seemed to be a property of that place. The house and the gardens. Beauty belonged to it, and the underlying fierceness which must be accepted with beauty. Animals belong to it, and so did books and all my other pleasures. Safety belongs to it, and so did my knowledge of good and evil, and my wobbly preference for good.
It was a paradise she always knew she would lose.
I felt outraged when someone first pointed out to me that my grandmother's house was not mine. When she died, it would be my uncle's. But whoever had given me that early, painful glimpse of the truth had done me a good turn. From that time, my love began, slowly, to take a wistful, nostalgic turn. I felt that I must treasure every detail of it against the future. I remember standing under the great beech tree by the lawn, trying to will some essence of myself into the still green air, so that after I was dead, my ghost would materialize there.
So way back then, age 10, Diana became a harvester of memories.
The beech tree was there. Gone, gone, gone. So there's no place for me to haunt now. We had such fun. We were let loose. There was this enormous garden, there were the stables, there were the ponies, there was the farm, which all felt like ours once we were here. Our own home was much, much smaller and much, much simpler. But when we came here, it was like being let loose in a sort of perfect life, really. Here we are. This was a room which nobody ever came into until after tea. And after tea, Granny sat in her chair there, and it was the centre. And we all, the children all came down here and were read to and played. And that was still here. And that was the cupboard in which the toys were kept. So we could get out spillikins and things. Granny always had a little round table beside her, usually with a silver bowl full of Parma violets.
When I fell in love with a gardener's boy, I imagined him urinating, and I went through a phase of doing it myself in odd places, under a corner of the carpet, for example, leaving a few drops here and there like a dog establishing its territory. I was stunned when this habit was discovered, and so frightened and ashamed that I must have known all along that I was committing a bad breach of the rules. I never again experienced that impulse to pee in corners.
The room that the children were in mostly was the morning room. It's a very cosy room. The grown-ups were all next door in the library. We would be rollicking about in here. But there were books, all books along there. This was bookshelves up to the top.
And what were you reading?
Actually, I read all George Meredith's novels in here, or most of them. I remember Granny coming into that door and saying, "Darling, you enjoying all those Merediths?" I don't think I was, really. I was reading things that I couldn't understand.
It was only years later, when I picked up The Egotist for what I thought to be the first time, that I rediscovered those sessions on the window seat in the morning room. I would think, but I've been here before. I've seen this. And gradually, the whole thing swam up.
There's Grandpapa.
How did you get on with him?
Oh, I don't remember a single word I exchanged. I mean, he was very remote, really. I do remember being embarrassed. He was sitting here in his chair. My small sister was crawling about there, and I was there, and she kept on showing her knickers.
Laziness. It was laziness that made one drift in the direction towards which they pushed one. Do what is fun. Don't do what is difficult. That was the principle we followed.
Now, did you think that the life you lived at that time was like everyone else's, or did you think you realised how privileged you were?
I think we began to understand we were privileged. I remember when I rather boastfully said to some small child, my granny's house has 20 bedrooms, and Mum said, "You must never boast about things you've got to people who've got less." And I thought, oh, yes, we were lucky.
Reading was what one did indoors. Riding was what one did outdoors. Ours was a hunting, shooting family. Many partridges and hares were killed every winter for its pleasure. Class came into it, even for the very young. On the whole, poor people didn't hunt or shoot. We felt that those activities and the rituals which surrounded them were somehow part of the superiority with which our families were blessed.
How many staff were there?
There was a cook, there was a kitchen maid, there was a scullery maid, there was a butler, and to begin with, there was also a footman, so that's 5. There was Hannah, who was the head housemaid. There were 2 housemaids under her, 6, 7, 8, and there was Granny's personal maid, 9. This was a marvellous banister for sliding down.
"You are not the only pebble on the beach," was often said to me during my childhood. But I knew pebbles well. It was obvious that there was an infinite number of them and an infinite variety, and that they were all equally real. I handled them, but more often I looked at them. It was by looking at pebbles that I began to feel their nature, and it is by looking at them that I feel the nature of people. "What are you thinking?" my lover asks. And often I'm not thinking, I'm looking.
So you were prepared, knowing that I was coming to the East Coast.
Yes, you've wrapped up warm.
Wrapped up well.
Diana was sent away to school. It felt like a life sentence.
It was a small school looking over the North Sea. We were herded down from time to time for the treat of a plunge into the ice-cold, gravy-coloured sea. There must, somewhere, have been some kind of land mass between its playing fields and the North Pole, but it did not feel as though there was.
It was called North House and South House, and I was in North.
Well, were you called ill-grounded? Is that the phrase?
I was ill-grounded because I'd had a series of sweet, dear governesses. I didn't go to school till I was 14, you see, and they really hadn't taught me much. I quite enjoyed the fact that one was able to learn more at school, really. But it still seemed like prison. It still seemed like prison because I wanted to be at home. I wanted to be riding. I wanted to be meeting boys. I wanted to be meeting boys. And we were hardly allowed to look at boys. I always secretly felt that I was thinking about boys and sex and love more than anybody else. And I was sort of rather careful not to show that.
What did they make of you at the school?
They thought I was a clever but lazy girl. And I think that was probably quite accurate. Oh, Runton Hill School, September
26 to 31.
In the garden, there was a thing called the Dell, which was there, I don't know whether it still exists, where we used to put on our plays.
Today we present Of the Wind in the Willows, Toad's Adventure.
That's me. I was Badger.
Oh, my God,
I was
that's
Badger
you.
in that play.
Oh, wise old Badger.
Oh, there you are, wearing your trousers.
I was wearing trousers and someone lent me a pipe. That I will remember. That was in the Dell.
Well, let's see what else is here. Let's go one at a time.
I don't remember.
look at this.
Dancing classes. There I am again. There I am being Olivia.
Looking rather beautiful.
Desire him not to flatter with his lord, nor hold him up with hopes. I am not for him. If that the youth will come this way tomorrow, I'll give him reasons for it. Hie thee, Malvolio.
I enjoyed that.
You enjoyed playing that part?
I enjoyed it, yes. My father said that I gave a dignified performance. I can't remember anything happening in the Dell that it wasn't sunny. There must have been days when we were rained off. All quite unrecognizable. The only thing that has stayed the same is the sea.
While at school here, Diana already had a boyfriend, her brother's home tutor. One night in the holidays, he gave her a lift home from a party.
Halted by shut gates at a level crossing, Paul had put his arm round me again. When he turned my face up and kissed me on the mouth, we were both surprised. I, because his lips were cold and a little sticky, whereas I had expected them to be warm and smooth. He, because mine were hot and parted, whereas he had expected them to be like a child's. He told me later that he'd thought, the little devil, she's been at it already. This is not the first time. But it was. I was thinking, Paul is kissing me, and high time too.
You met Paul when you were 15 years old, didn't you?
Oh, yes, you see. That used to be rather a comfort to think of when I was being scolded. I used to think, you know, I wouldn't have said perhaps in those days, bugger you, but that's what I used to think when I stood in front of her. Only 3 weeks ago, Paul was kissing me.
Were you pursuing him at that time, or was he pursuing you?
I was waiting for him. I was waiting for him, because he was about 5 years older than me, and I was quite realistic. I realized that I was too young to be of serious interest to him. I didn't expect him to fall in love with me when I was as young as that, but I intended that he should eventually do so.
And he did, of course.
And he did. He was very gifted at enjoying life. When you were with him, whatever you were doing, it seemed intensely interesting and fun, because it was for him. And I think he taught me a lot about that. And we had a wonderful time, really.
Diana went on to Oxford. In 1937, she and Paul got engaged and started sleeping together. Pretty bold for that time. But Paul went with the Air Force to Egypt. Soon after the war started, his letters stopped, until eventually one came asking to be released. He wanted to marry someone else.
It affected my life very deeply. The fact that I lost him in the end and he would dump me made me unhappy for a very long time.
Ultimately, you didn't blame him for it, did you?
Not really. I blamed him for the way he did it, but not for doing it. I mean, I couldn't ever blame someone who had gone away and was facing what he was facing, probably going to be killed. He was flying. Oh, look. I couldn't blame him for wanting another woman, if he met her, attractive woman. But I could blame him, and I did blame him, for not letting me know what was happening. Because I was left in a vacuum, thinking, and going on in a rather foolish way, as you do when you're in love, thinking, well, perhaps it might be all right. If I hang on in there long enough, it might become all right again. He may turn up again, and then we'd be all right. And that was a terrible... That was what was so sapping of one's energy and made one miserable.
And I love the way you stayed in bed for the next 25 years.
I stayed in bed as much as I could. Like a mole, I went underground.
So for the rest of your life, you didn't raise your expectations in terms of being in love. You obviously had your adventures all the time, but you didn't...
I expected it to equate with pain, really, which was a very bad thing to have happened to me. But I didn't expect a great deal from men from then on.
Soon after, Diana found these words in her younger sister's diary.
He told me he was not going to kiss me. He said I mustn't begin that sort of thing too soon, or it would spoil me. Look at Di, he said. You don't want to be like her, and of course I don't. The shriveling sensation of reading those words is something I still flinch from recalling.
She was invited on a sailing holiday.
Out on the Broad, the engaged couple would be whispering and laughing. In the boat's cabin, Hugh and the girl would be holding each other close and kissing. I knew myself to be absolutely alone. It was so absolute that for a time I might have been my skeleton lying somewhere, as Paul's was soon to lie, to be picked clean by the elements. This is it, I thought. This is how it is. It put the seal on my loneliness for so much of my life.
The gates of Eden had clanged shut, Diana wrote later. House, happiness, love were gone. She had to forge her own future. Paul was killed in the war. Diana started life as a working woman, signing up with the Admiralty in Bath.
Every morning I would get up to walk down to my work in the Admiralty, and I would walk as slowly as I possibly could round the crescent, enjoying every bit of it. And the view, of course, was a good deal rougher then, because that was during the war, and there wasn't much mowing of the grass going on. And of course it was absolutely silent. And then I used to have to hurry very quickly the rest of the way. When I was here, I was in my very early 20s.
Oh, lovely Bath. There is no city in England more beautiful. A man who was walking me home one night said, "It's like going into a church." I was speechless for several minutes in outrage at hearing my own feelings put into such clumsy words. I am one of those people who are hardly ever totally involved in an emotion. There's always a beady-eyed watcher at the back of my mind.
Feels odd. I wish, in fact, I could have a little bit of time here and get used to it and sort of just stay and potter about. But I've got to give a talk about being old. One dies to go in and buy some lovely earrings or something. Oh dear, duty calls, yes.
It's my very great pleasure this afternoon to introduce two of the most perceptive and eloquent of women writers, memoirist Diana Athill and journalist Michelle Hansen, for a discussion about memoirs and autobiography and how to grow old.
You're meant to not care when you hit 40, aren't you, what people think, so you can say what you like. But I don't know, because I wasn't really writing very early. I think you perhaps do get a bit braver, don't you?
She doesn't really know, because she's not very, very old, you see. She writes about being old. And if you happen to be 92 and someone who was 60 is writing about being old, you think, what's the poor girl talking about?
67. But we're all lumped together, aren't we? Over 60, you're all old.
You know, you said that on the whole one can say what one feels and one doesn't mind anymore. And I think probably by the time one's 40, one still goes on minding. And possibly by the time one's 60, one still minds quite much. By the time one's 92, one really does not mind.
Something else to look forward to.
When I was young, I remember absolutely shrivelling at the idea of making a fool of oneself.
Your creed, I think, was that when you write, it has to be as it is, that you can't dodge being frank. But don't you sometimes want to leave some things out? And you thought, well, I'm not sure I want to let everybody read that about myself.
No, I didn't feel like that at all as I was writing. By the time I finished, I did rather I wondered what my mother was going to think. That I thought, well, I've written it, so I better lump it. She got round it by never mentioning it. It was very English. And I thought when I was younger how hypocritical, how silly. And now I think it's really a pretty brilliant technique. If you have a daughter and you love her, and she does something that you can't like, all right, let's pretend she didn't do it.
The unspokenness had many layers.
My mother married a very, very nice man, who she knew was a very, very nice man, but turned out to be not physically attractive to her, which was a sort of disaster, really.
Were you aware of that at the time, or was it something that...
Well, I mean, one knew that they didn't get on. One knew that he irritated her out of her skin. And my brother and I used to say, oh, God, it's not, you know, he's done something silly. He was slow, and she was getting more and more tense. And we were thinking, oh, God, why does he have to do that? It's going to set her off. And it always did. All their quarrels were about something quite trivial. And of course, one didn't realize as a child why this was. It was because of a physical mismatch between them, which was on her nerves. But one knew something was wrong.
Her mother never let on that Diana's younger sister was the product of an affair. And Diana never let on to her parents about the life she was leading.
One device for filling emptiness was promiscuity. Lack of energy prevented me from ranging about in pursuit of men, but if they turned up, I slept with them. Several of the painless affairs involved other people's husbands. If a wife ever found out, it would have been from her husband's carelessness, not mine. I wish now that in my youth I had loved my family less. I might have had the courage for revolt instead of going quietly underground. If I had been open about the sexual freedom I was practicing, if I had pressed political arguments instead of sliding out of them into silence, there might not have been the breach I expected and feared.
Never had a confrontation. I was cowardly about confrontations. If I didn't hold with the same ideas as they had, I just sort of shut up about it. Went my own way. Because one didn't want to have a quarrel with them, really.
During the war, Diana had moved to London. There she met a Hungarian Jewish émigré called André Deutsch. He offered her a job in a publishing company he was planning to start when the war was over.
When you first met André, you had a brief affair.
I did, yes. Very brief, really.
Why so brief?
Well, we just didn't really sort of suit each other as lovers, but on the other hand, we became friends in a strange way. And so we ended up being much more like brother and sister.
And Diana would become editorial director of one of the great independent publishing ventures in Britain. For the next 50 years, she worked with some of the best-known writers of the 20th century. Philip Roth, Simone de Beauvoir, Jack Kerouac, John Updike, Stevie Smith. Their first big hit was with Norman Mailer's The Naked and the Dead.
How did you manage to get The Naked and the Dead?
Nobody else dared do it. The word fuck, which appeared, he was writing about soldiers at war, naturally, that's what they mostly said with every sentence. The American publisher said we can't publish that, and so they'd substituted the word, which is too absurd, really. They'd substituted fug, F-U-G. Well, I mean, what could be sillier? It sounds just like fuck. Everyone knows it means fuck, but yet they felt that that made it decent. But the English wouldn't accept even that.
6 bigger publishers had turned Mailer down, so André Deutsch got it.
On the front page of the Sunday Times, written by the editor, there was this small thing about this perfectly revolting and evil book is being published, which no decent man would leave about where his women or children could see it. He literally used those words.
It became a cause célèbre. There was an injunction against it, a question in the House, loads of free publicity, but no ban.
It was a wonderful, wonderful event because it made us. We, from being quite unknown, became quite a respectable firm.
Eventually, Andre Deutsch was able to buy these offices in central London. They were later shared with an art supplier who's since taken over the building.
My original office must be there. It's off the passage which went right through to the back. Here we are. Back home. How extraordinary. I loved being here because I had a big window looking out.
Yes.
And it was too small to share with anybody. Andre used to be great fun for getting the maximum out of everything. Any space that could be inhabited by two people had to be inhabited by two people. The rest of the editorial department was condemned to the basement, where I bitterly resented it.
Dictatorships work. That is why they are so readily accepted. And if they are demonstrably more or less just, as they can be to start with, they are accepted with a gratitude more personal than can be inspired by other kinds of regime.
I was supposed to be a director. But, I mean, nobody was a director in this film excepting Andre.
And I'd like to say thank you also to my very, very first editor in England, who was Diana Athill, who was with Andre Deutsch way back in 1969 when they took a chance on a Canadian young person.
How did the relationship work between Andre Deutsch and Diana and you?
Well, Diana was the editor, and she worked out of a broom closet. As far as I can tell, it was a very, very small space. And I didn't know that she was Andre Deutsch's partner, but she was, whereas he had an enormous office with a huge desk. The relationship seemed to be that he insulted people and she went around and mollified them. I always liked her. She was very elegant.
Writers came and sat here. Vidya came often and walked out of here in a huff, too.
Sometimes even Diana couldn't mollify people. Vidya Naipaul was a handful.
If I have to cheer myself up, I say to myself, at least I'm not married to Vidya Naipaul.
You said that having enjoyed him for a while, you then had to endure him.
I mean, I admired him very much as a writer, always. That was sort of unquestioned. 18 of his books he did with us, you know. He was sort of like family, in the way that when you can be really quite fond of someone in the family who's awful.
Yet Naipaul once said that Diana was the best editor he'd ever had. Her gift for storytelling proved invaluable even to the demanding and meticulous Jean Rhys. Her prequel to Jane Eyre is the story of the Caribbean first wife.
Diana made suggestions for building up the character of Mr. Rochester in Wide Sargasso Sea, letting him love his first wife passionately before the marriage fell apart. This really helped the book enormously.
Jean Rhys wrote,
I am in touch with Miss Athill, who wrote me the kindest of letters. Miss Athill suggested a few weeks of happiness for the unfortunate couple.
Jean Rhys took the suggestion and ran with it.
As soon as I wrote that bit, I realised that he must have fallen for her, and violently too. The black people have a good word for it. She magic with him, because you see, that's what it is, magic, intoxication, not love at all.
Diana always says that she learned a lot about how to write from Jean Rhys.
The extreme precision of her writing, cutting, she used to say cut. And when you're writing, don't think about how you're writing, try to think very hard of how it was, what you're writing about, try to envisage it very clearly.
It's really interesting, isn't it? But here she is, she's a fiction writer, and yet what she writes is very close to her own feelings and experience. And getting it just as it was, that phrase obviously meant a lot to you when you started to write.
It was always very close, really, to her own life. As it got complicated in difficult situations, she got it to be exactly as they really were, so that you knew what it was like.
Has writing always been partly getting things off your mind? Yes, very much so. I find it almost impossible to absolutely make up a thing. It has to be something I know.
And actually, I suppose you can write about being unhappy, and that can make you feel a bit better.
Oh, yes, when you write about a thing, you forget it. Or at least it doesn't worry you anymore.
She was so ashamed of quite a lot of what had happened to her and what she'd done that she couldn't face it, being known that it was, I mean, she had to go into fiction. She was quite incapable of coping with life, really. She was one of those writers so perfectionist that every word was thought out right. But she needed a great deal of looking after.
Now Diana herself began to create. She writes of the energy, something bubbling inside of me. At first, it was short stories.
A feeling would brew up, and then the story would come as though it had been there all the time. By God, I thought with jubilation, I'm going to get it just as it was. It was something I had done spontaneously, for the pleasure of it, something as much a part of me as the colour of my eyes.
Your desk is now pastels.
Now lovely pastels. Look at them, aren't they marvellous? Honestly, they'd make one's mouth water. That's a wonderful colour.
Yes.
I'm going to buy one of these.
No, you have one. But there's a price for this, which is you have to sign all the copies of all your books that I've been collecting over the years.
Oh. This is the most successful book I have ever written, described by my publisher as a bona fide bestseller, because it's rather cheerful about being old. It's cheered people up.
Yes. Now, this was the first book of yours that I ever read.
Ah, down instead of a letter.
Now, when did you write
I never
that?
have liked that jacket very much. I wrote this, you see, in the early 60s. At the time, I thought, well, why'd they give me such a horrible old hand? Now my hand does look rather like that. I don't mind it so much.
It was her first memoir. After 20 years of pain and humiliation, she was happy at last.
You do not look up because you know you cannot climb the tree. You have forgotten by now that there is fruit hidden among its leaves. Then suddenly, a great velvety peach falls plump into your hand. It happens to other people, perhaps, never to oneself. I am still licking peach juice off my fingers.
And then another peach. She met the Jamaican playwright Barry Record. I slipped off a rock into clear, warm water, she wrote.
I got over that sense of being on the downhill with Barry. I had a very happy time in my 40s.
Today, even where British rule remains, it is strongly challenged.
These were the early 60s, days of decolonisation, with black and African writers getting into print. This was the world Barry moved in.
Any writer feels that he is part of a civilizing influence. He's defining feelings, and if you define a feeling, then you widen the emotional currency of your society.
That relationship with Barry has lasted an incredibly long time, hasn't it?
Very long time. It was very easy, a relationship.
And yet it was also very unconventional in its own way, because he was a married man, after all.
He wasn't a married man until she divorced him very sensibly.
Why did you say very sensibly?
He just simply couldn't stand the idea of being possessed by anybody.
I can't remember whether I felt a passing scruple at taking up so quickly and enthusiastically with yet another married man. I can remember thinking what a comfort it was that he had a nice, competent wife to look after him, so I needn't ever worry on his behalf. Being the other woman suited me so well.
When his wife kicked him out, Barry moved into Diana's North London flat and stayed for 40 years.
Well, you see, at a certain point, Barry and I stopped being lovers, and we just became very old friends. Barry very much disapproved of romantic love, and I did too. I mean, we both agreed that we did love each other, but in a very unromantic way.
Then you embrace his young lover side.
Well, and that was a huge piece of luck in my life.
The sun is really lovely now, isn't it?
Sally turned out to be one of the nicest people I've ever known. Hello.
Nice to see you. Hello.
Hi, this is my friend Sally.
Hello, Sally.
I say, my goodness, look at the door. To this day, Sally is terribly important in my life. I'll ask the Highgate Library to get it. Yes.
Quite soon, it occurred to me that since she was spending almost every night in Barry's bed, keeping on her bedsitter was a waste of money, so I suggested she should move in with us. What I felt was that now I had a lovely new friend in the house, as well as a darling old one, and the next 2 years were some of the happiest I can remember.
Do you know, I made a mistake. I thought that time when you were living with me and Barry, I thought it was about 2 years.
Wasn't it? It was much longer.
It was 6, wasn't it?
It was about 6 years.
6 years.
A marvellous time.
I think disapproved of by some people at the time. I don't know, everyone was always much too polite to say anything. But I think people used to think it was odd, don't you?
I do.
And they may have thought that it was an active menage a trois.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Barry wasn't the only one who'd been having affairs.
In the course of my close relationship with Barry, I had come to feel more at home with black men than with white. I did, from then on, start out with a bias towards the black, or at any rate, the un-English.
I think curiosity came into my relationships a lot. I think it was wanting to find out about people. It was just terribly interesting to get sort of under the skin of someone so completely different to myself.
Barry was working abroad when she met a young writer from Egypt through editing his book in 1964. She fell in love at once, though he didn't reciprocate.
He was your author, of course, and your lodger, but he also became, for a moment at least, your lover, and very much a part of your life.
In fact, I took him, I sort of looked after him. And I've sometimes thought that I've never been, basically, a very maternal woman. I've never particularly wanted to have children, excepting for one very short time. And I've never minded now not having them. But I'm not sure that this thing about Dee Dee wasn't a form of using the maternal instinct. One looked after him in the end.
She let him stay in their flat for 3 years. It became a poisonous power play with a mad mutual intensity. Just as with her sister 30 years before, she read Dee Dee's diary.
My own name jumped out at me at once. I find Diana repulsive, he wrote. I find it impossible to live in the same flat with someone whose physical body provokes mine to cringe. This has led me to detest everything she does, says, and writes. The blood rushed up into my face and my hands went cold.
She confesses things most people never would, with a detachment that can be chilling. When they finally sleep together, Dee Dee asks her not to tell Barry.
Of course I won't, I promise. I was already mulling in my head the written account, as exact as possible, which I was going to show him one day.
Dee Dee was a depressive, and in 1969, he killed himself in her flat. His note read, "I'm going to kill myself tonight. I'm leaving you my diary, love." Well edited, it could be a good piece of literature.
Well, he involved me in painful experiences. And of course, my first book had been a therapeutic thing. In a way, that's what writing seemed at that stage in my life to be for. That if you had a horrible, painful experience and you were feeling haunted by it, the way to get rid of it was to write it out.
Dee Dee, whose real name was Wagi Gali, is about to have his only book reissued.
I've got to write an introduction or preface to Wagi's book. After all these years, it's not going to be easy. I think probably I shall have to read much more of it just to get myself back into the mood. But I'm going to start hoping for the best. I remember at the funeral crying and crying, which I wasn't expecting to do at all. It was just very sad that her life should have been so ruined.
Diana wrote about her private hell with Waggy long after the events. In the 70s and 80s, she was more an editor than a writer. One book in particular proved a monumental task, and finally, an extraordinary achievement.
The road to heaven was a path 10 feet wide with 10-foot fences of barbed wire on each side, through which the naked prisoners, in rows of 5, had to run the 100 metres up the hill to the baths, the gas chambers.
Gita Sereni brought to Andre Deutsch a unique series of interviews she'd done with the commandant of Treblinka death camp, Franz Stangl.
It was so huge, the bulk of the material. I couldn't look at it in my desk in the office. I had to take it home and put it on a table. It covered a whole table. Stacks of stuff. And that is a night I shall never forget. It was the raw material of the interviews she'd made. And of course, there was stuff in that so absolutely blood-chilling.
Stangl said, usually I'd be working in my office. There was a great deal of paperwork, till about 11. By that time, they were well ahead with the work up there. He meant that by this time, the 5,000 to 6,000 people who had arrived that morning were dead. The work was the disposal of the bodies. You didn't feel they were human beings? I asked Stangl. Cargo, he said tonelessly. They were cargo.
One couldn't just sit there, but I kept on walking around the room trying to escape from it, really. But the only thing I was sure of at the end of that was, well, one thing is we'll have to do without adjectives, because if you said horrifying, ghastly, monstrous, they were inadequate. It was as though they were little bits of paper just flicking, you know, pointless to say these things. All you could do, really, was to present what had happened.
She's a superb critic. It's good for me because she's quite demanding.
In what way demanding?
Well, in exactitude. And in not exaggerating, in keeping it unemotional and yet strong. That's quite difficult.
Yes, especially with material like that.
Yes. She was quite exceptional as an editor. She was a wonderful reader and a very, very good questioner. And that's what you need. It's a wonderful thing to talk to somebody who shows being touched. You know, I don't mean makes a thing of it, but in whose face you see a reaction. And that's, for the one who is telling the story, I think it's just a gift.
And of course, one ended up in a funny way. Of the horror went off it because it became a job. I think it was, without any question, the most important editorial job I ever did.
Diana was 75 when she retired from publishing. 7 years later, in the year 2000, she broke through to literary fame with Stet, her book about her life as an editor. It was swiftly followed by an outpouring about her childhood, her lovers, and her mother. Barry got ill, and she cared for him until it became too much.
I was coming up to 90, and he was really beginning to need nursing. I couldn't do it. If Barry's niece hadn't rescued us, I don't know what, I would probably be dead by now. This wonderful niece said, oh, I'm going to take him back to Jamaica.
Before that, Diana had looked after her mother.
My mother was a very keen gardener, all the family were.
The discomfort of guilt made me take on the job of carer. Perhaps a wonderfully unselfish person gets satisfaction from making a good job of it. If you are a selfish one, you manage by contriving as many escapes and compensations as you can. It is not an admirable solution, but I don't suppose I'm the only old person to resort to it.
And once I'd planted a few things with my own hands, and they actually flowered. It was that sort of miracle. To my own amazement, I became my own mother.
Her mother was living near Diana's cousin Barbara's cottage in Norfolk.
Calm down, calm down, calm down. Oh, please, hush. That's better. That's better.
The fact that death was, so to speak, up in the attic of her house, waiting to come down and do something cruelly and fatally painful to her, frightened me. I was not afraid of her being dead, but I was terrified of the process of her dying.
In fact, Diana's mother died peacefully the day before her 96th birthday.
After a long sleep, she turned her head a little and said, "Did I tell you that last week Jack drove me to the nursery garden to buy that eucalyptus?" Her last words, before sleeping again, out of which sleep she didn't wake, were, "It was absolutely divine."
I'd have seen a magpie.
These graves look like they've been here for centuries.
Some of them have been here for a very long time. None of them, I think, more neglected than ours. Ours are really rather shameful. They're not anything that I bother about, or any of us do, really. Once one's dead, one's dead. I wouldn't mind being scattered here myself, but I don't particularly want to have a stone or anything.
Have you given instructions?
No, people keep on telling me to. I say whatever they like. It's not nothing to do with me, really. Here's us. That's Mummy and Daddy. Here's my father and my mother.
Are they both together in here?
No, she's not here, sure. She's sprinkled in the garden.
She's sprinkled in the garden?
That's what she wanted, and so I sprinkled her in the garden. But I put her on here so she would be remembered somewhere.
Recently, Diana has been diagnosed with cancer, which doctors are watching but not treating at the moment.
Does coming here make you, now you have this wretched cancer, does it make you think more about the end than you even did before?
Being dead doesn't matter a hoot. One does hope that dying can be done decently. I hope I don't go screaming in agony.
No.
I've got this thing sort of threatening. It might become vicious. If I manage to die before it does, I won't really mind.
It's that unflinching gaze that makes her writing remarkable.
Somewhere towards the end was so beautifully written. Thank you. Such a pleasure.
And it's her success as a writer that has made a life she's happy to contemplate.
And I quite agree with you talking about death before.
The more one comes to terms with it, the better.
Yes. I can't tell you what this has meant to me, reading that book. Excellent. Thank you.
I had seen it for so long as a life of failure, but now, when I look back, who would believe it? It was nothing of the sort.
We used to catch newts in the stream in the kitchen garden. There used to be dozens of newts. Can't remember what we did to the newts. Along here, there were the peaches, which we used to come in and steal and then eat them in secret.